Sorry. We won't talk about that.
It is we'll splice this in later, but the gym that we do not speak of. Aaron, you're just making more work for Aaron right now. Like all this heavy editing that he has to do, my ad reads that he doesn't like. Speaking of ad reads, I think we should start with some ad reads.
Might as well do it.
Okay, well, we're going to sit back. We're going to do some ad reads. First one is for Project X Guard and Raul Chavez, who's doing some not-for-profit work with some at-risk youth in the GTA area. So if you know anybody who is looking to knows any at-risk youth or somebody who could be influenced by, the power and love that jiu-jitsu can spread, that all three of us know, reach out to Raul Chavez on Instagram. That is Raul Chavez. He's at Project X Guard, or you can also reach out to us on the Choking Hazard podcast page. And we also have our other sponsor for this evening. Hey, Arthur, I want to ask you real quick. Do you know what time it is?
8:48.
No, wrong. It's 4:20 because it's Spirit Leaf Waterdown in Hamilton, located at Aaron.
64 Hamilton Street North.
Alex and his crew there, they have all the CBD and THC needs that you could ever possibly need. They have edibles, gummies, candies. King Kong ain't got shit on them. They got everything that you need. They got vape pens. They got everything that you can need when it comes to your THC and CBD needs. They're located at, Aaron, one more time, located at
64 Hamilton Street North.
Come on, we got to keep that running gag going. There's a post that we have with a promo code. It is CH Podcast 10. It only works in store, so you have to show them that when you check out, and it's only specific to the watered down location of Spirit Leaf, located at, Aaron, one more time.
64 Hamilton Street North. You could just learn the address and do it yourself.
No,
right?
It's better when you do it. CH Podcast 10. You're gonna show them that post at checkout. You're gonna get 10% off. That's an only in-store promotion though, and only at that location, 64 Hamilton Street North, Waterdown, Ontario, Canada. All right, let's kick this thing off. First things first. We have Arthur. Do we call you Zuka, Chandramohan? What do we call you here?
Anything. I mean, if you can pronounce Chandramohan, yeah, that's my last name.
All right, that's officially. Where did you get the Zuka name from? Or you just started calling yourself that one?
No. Some guy. It's not a great story, but some guy called me Arthur Zuka, and I actually think he meant Arthur Zulu because he said you're like that African warlord. He was a white belt, I was a blue belt, so I beat him, and then I was like, that was weird, and then I come in the next day to the gym and everyone's like Zuka, and then I looked into it and I couldn't find any Arthur Zukas, but I could only find Arthur Zulus. So to the best of my knowledge, my nickname is a typo.
It just stuck with you to this day,
since like blue belt. This is like 10 years.
I had this old training partner who was a black belt in judo. I don't know if he's listening to us, but shout out to Payne Peters. He's like an old MMA fighter I used to train with. And for the longest time, he thought my last name was Bryce instead of Briars. And I just let him go with it for like a year. He just called me, he's like, hey, Bryce, how you doing, man? And I'm just like, hey, how you doing? What's up? And then he just kept saying it and it just kind of stuck. I was just never really correcting him, I guess. And just... here we are to this day. He still calls me Bryce, even though I think he knows my last name by now.
I had a coworker. She worked with me for several years, and then one day she just started calling me Drew. And I didn't correct her just because I was like kind of curious. So I remember telling my other coworkers, look, she just calls me Drew, and it kind of continued for like a month or something, and then one day she just snapped back to Arthur.
That's funny.
It was like super weird. Super weird.
Either she like completely forgot that, like, oh yeah, I'm calling this guy Drew, or it's just like, yeah,
never acknowledged it.
It's funny those awkward conversations of just you're just calling one person. It's like, oh man, you know how like sometimes somebody for a while, but like you never been formally introduced to them,
and it's too late.
And it's too late, and you're just this is weird. I don't want to ask him for his name or his or her name because it's been like a few months. It's like, and then I actually did this one time. I got somebody to go introduce them to that person just so I knew.
You have to.
Oh man. Yeah, that's their name. Yeah, that's it. That's their name.
Yeah, but like it's funny how like nicknames you can never choose your own nickname. It's always somebody they give it to you and then it spirals from there. And it's
I'm
just
I'm
like,
okay
I've
with
had,
mine. It could be worse.
yeah,
It could be a
you
lot
got a
worse.
good one.
Yeah,
You
I
got
got
a good
lucky.
one. I got a shitty one when I was in like with Marco and all that. It was all.
What
it was
is it, Aaron?
It was Cliffy. So basically, their whole premise around it was like the big red dog. So Clifford basically. It was named after the fucking children's book. Like there's that, and then it kind of morphed into Rouge at the club. So then it was like they didn't want to call me Red anymore, and then it was Rouge instead. So I'm like, whatever.
I usually called you either like Raggedy Ann or that angry ginger guy who was always stomping around angry for the first couple of years I was there.
Yeah, those work too.
Those work.
Excellent. So I want to ask a question because Arthur, you are about the only person who can make a sweatshirt and a hoodie, mind you, under a gi look good every time I see you teaching on Instagram. So what's with the hoodie under the gi? Is it cold in that place or what?
No, it's hot and there's like a heater, but I think because I don't roll and I kind of just teach. But I've always just been very cold. Okay. And then actually it's not just me. John Thomas does it too. And then once I saw John Thomas do it, I was like, okay, this is okay. This is acceptable. We just have to tip this into the general population.
I guess it's acceptable considering I think a lot of time he was teaching in Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, or Norway or something. I don't know. Yeah. No, maybe not.
Northern Scandinavian countries. Yeah. So if you're wearing a sweater and it's like -40 outside, I can understand it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Canada can get cold, so
freezing. Yeah, and like John Thomas looks like a very skinny guy. Like not too much insulation on him.
Yeah, I think you two have very similar builds, just like tall, lanky. Just
yeah.
Is that like I was going to ask you like about people who were like big influences on your jiu-jitsu? I think John Thomas is probably one of them, but like
now actually, yeah. There's kind of like 3-4 people I follow very closely. One guy doesn't even speak English, but I have learned more from this guy in 1 year than probably the past 3 years.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Shinchan Gorilla?
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah. I follow him as well.
He's amazing. He's awesome. He is amazing. I was actually supposed to be in Korea, like right now, training with him. But of course, because when you go there, I think you have to do 2 weeks of isolation, and then you have to do another like week of regional isolation. Oh, so, wow. Altogether, that's 6 weeks when you include me training and then coming back and isolating. So it was just kind of not worth it. But that's definitely. And then the guy I lost to in the finals of the Asian Open was one of his like students and training partners. So then I was even more sold. I was like, okay, this guy's definitely good. And he's actively studying a lot, which I like because I'll watch the Mendez brothers teach something and then I'll watch him reteach it. So he's still very actively studying. And yeah, I think he's an amazing teacher. And then John Thomas, yeah. Other like those two guys are kind of like my main go-tos right now.
Mm-hmm. What kind of drove you to them originally? Was it just their teaching style, or is it just kind of what they've been doing?
So I mean, I think out of all the jiu-jitsu people, one guy I always had a lot of respect for was Ostap because he has a very, intelligent approach to developing his game and how to improve it. And he always credited John Thomas quite a bit. And then there was a sweep that he hit on actually another brown guy at, I think, Pans. His name might have been Siraj.
Say your memories. The other brown guy. That's
or Ram or something. Ram Anand or something. Anyways, he fought this guy and he hit a sweep and then he did a match analysis and he's like, John Thomas taught me this. And then like 5 years later, I saw John Thomas pop up on my Instagram, so I followed him. And then I actually was like 2 weeks ago, he finally explained that sweep. So and then Shinchan Gorilla, I think he kind of rolls like me. And I just feel like he's a much better version of me. So I kind of like, it kind of gives me some insight into where I could take my game in the coming years. Like he's big, but he doesn't really, not that I'm big, but he's big and he doesn't use it. He like drives down his level to meet his students. He puts himself in a lot of positions, but he works a lot of like a half guard, lapel feed, hip switch, dogfight position stuff. I don't know. I think our games are similar. His is just much more refined. So yeah. And I like his like vibe. Like he's very chill. Like there's a video he put up of him dancing and sweeping. Like I love that, that he like trains hard, fights hard, studies hard, but also like has a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, he's pulled together some really good like instructional stuff lately that I've seen. Especially, I know they were shut down for a while, and then they're reopened up now. Like I think at one point, I think they're even rolling with mask on.
They still are. That's how amazing is that? Like the culture of respect there. Like here, we can't even get people to wear a mask in the elevator, but these guys will roll with the mask on. That's incredible. Yeah,
no, it's crazy. So
yeah,
no, there's big things coming out of that place for sure.
Yeah, there's some tough dudes. Like I remember at the Asian Open when I was watching, like every division, it was Korean people just like ripping through, and I was like, oh, I I understood the level because I just assumed, like they're from Asian countries, they'll probably be a little bit smaller, and then they're all just like Korean guys are huge, like they're huge. They're all like briars.
They're a bigger breed.
Yeah,
I'm about like 205, 210 right now. I'm putting on some weight. I'm hitting the weights again. This is, I don't know. I've talked about it before on like a couple podcasts ago. My body feels better physically. Like I don't feel as banged up like rolling after. It's just like my joints aren't as like sore and achy and like beat up. But like I know like you've had like some history with like injuries as well. Like is it
like one injury that's just ongoing, right? But so you know what, during the lockdown I was so bored. I was lifting like 3-4 times a week, and I went up to 180, and I had to for me, which is like a 25-pound jump, right? In honestly, it must have been like a month and a half or something. It was so quick, and I had to stop because my work clothes didn't fit me anymore.
What? Oh, you should have at least like kept going or like modified your program or something. But like, how are you feeling? Like,
I mean, I was feeling strong, but for me, like I kind of agree with you. It was amazing lifting and then rolling because I have such a hard time warming up. Like my joints always feel stiff, but when I lift, and I don't lift heavy, like I'll do one plate, and just for deadlifts and that kind of thing. But when I lift, like I feel amazing to roll, and especially when I lift with a hoodie, like my body actually warms up. Man, I'm like an old guy, man.
It's like an RPG thing. It's like hoodie, like lift +5, joint protection, shield defense +3.
That's my problem. Like I can never warm up. It takes me forever to warm up. So that's why like when I compete, it takes me an hour to warm up, which is like a nightmare.
Which is a nightmare. It takes you a few matches to get going.
I warm up outside. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you like this year, like with COVID and everything, like because I know you've been working full time, and I think you've been teaching a little bit here and there at like different places. So like, tell me a little bit like about that experience, what it's been like the last year or so, like with work, like your own work as well. If you want to tell people what you do outside of jiu-jitsu, and then what you're doing within it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I work for public health. That's my day job. But even before COVID, like, I used to always work at my day job 40 hours, and then I used to teach about 40 hours. So I always I worked a lot because I don't like just sitting at home. If I sit at home, I'm just going to eat junk food and watch TV. And to me, that's not really very gratifying. So yeah, in terms of teaching, I think over the years I've cut back. Like when I was maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, I used to do 30 privates a week. But I just don't enjoy that as much. Like I think maybe I was at that age where it was just amazing to kind of, I guess, make that money and have that kind of an opportunity and, that kind of a client base. But now I've trimmed it down for sure. I prefer doing classes because, it's more relaxed. And I just do privates with like 2 or 3 people, and I kind of handpick the students to just be really dedicated, amazing students with potential, and not like in terms of competition, because I find there's a greater burnout rate, like in terms of lifetime jiu-jitsu. So one guy's 58, one guy's 48. Who's the third person? Oh yeah, and then the other guy's 22. But they're all really smart. 2 of them are not athletic at all, but I think they're going to be incredible in the coming years. They're just, they're built the way they do jiu-jitsu. Again, it's like a very, I guess, intellectual approach. So for instance, like even these guys, when they were white belts, they would say, even though 2 of them are big, they're like, I don't want to use force. So I said, okay, like, when you're new, you typically, you don't put someone into guard, I find, because it takes so long to get good at guard. The returns are much later on, right? So when someone's new, I just teach them passing, because you'll get those immediate results. Guard, it's going to be a couple of months of just getting killed, right? But all of these three students were okay with that, and they're like, I don't care about winning, I don't care about losing. Like, I just want to be good in 5 years. And to me, I was like, man, that's exciting. So I really handpick my students, and I look for students that can do 3-4 privates a week, and they'll just be amazing in a couple of years, I think.
No, I think that's perfect, because then you're tailoring those individuals and you're creating a client base for yourself that works, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you said it before, like you have the burnout students. It's great to have, that athletic individual who wants to do competitions all the time, but that might not be a long-term type individual.
I want a lifer.
As far as
exactly.
Yeah, you want a lifer, like something that's going to drive your business and something that works for you, rather than kind of having to work for it more than anything. The same way like you would do it in the personal training field.
Oh, like just the long-term clients, I guess.
Yeah.
And it just makes it more fun, I find. Like, I guess, sometimes teaching competitors, like, it's just so timeline and goal focused, short-term goal focused, that it kind of pulls the fun out of it, and it limits me in what I can teach. But when someone's thinking on a 5-15 year horizon, then I'm not stressed about the small stuff, because I know eventually the smaller holes will fill in, right? But it's pretty cool, because the way the rate of knowledge transfer and the availability of information these days, these like blue belts these days are better than I feel like we were as brown belts, 10 years ago. Like, I don't know if you agree, but I am like terrified looking at these blue belts.
Yeah, like I would say, especially you can look at like a lot of juveniles coming up. Like, it's insane, because a lot of them have been training since they're like 6, and now they're like 16, 17. Like, they're basically black belts already.
That's true. I mean, I would definitely think that's a long-term trend. Like Michael Tremblay, Allison Tremblay, there's so many, like Cameron Florzak, all these people were, kids training, for sure. But even just, if I look at blue belts when I started, I remember thinking, wow, this guy's like, we had one blue belt that I can think of, and I was like, this guy's so good, I'll never be this good. And now, like, the worst blue belt here would beat him, and that's absurd.
And it's the rate of knowledge as well. So like, things are getting a lot more refined and accelerated at a much quicker rate of learning. So like, you can go online, go on YouTube. There's like so many like breakdowns. Like, there's a lot of guys you can follow. Like John Thomas is like a perfect example of like the learning curve is so accelerated. Like, he's basically like, here's this 15-minute YouTube video on like this really awesome concept that like I didn't discover until I was a purple belt. And I was like, well, shit, where was this like 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Like that's how I feel sometimes, like watching some of this stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I figured that out. But that took me like years, versus some like maybe white belt could be watching that, and then they like something clicks and then they figure that out. And
yeah, I mean, I look at Matrix Guard. You have the two guys from Norway, Espen and Tommy. You have John Thomas teaching it and breaking down their footage. You have like BJJ Scout breaking it down in competition. And this is kind of, one of the most cutting edge pieces of technology, I guess, in jiu-jitsu right now, right? And, as soon as something big hits the scene, there's like 500 analysis videos on it, and you can follow a hashtag, which is amazing.
And then everybody else is going to learn it, and then it's just another tool.
Another old tool, yeah.
It's just another little tool.
So as you kind of like, again, going from when we were all white belts, blue belts, building that trend, right? Where do you kind of like, because everybody sees the difference of like where jiu-jitsu's going as far as the game goes. Yeah. What's your kind of perspective on it, where you see like certain trends going?
Like the sport as a whole, or I guess like, as Keenan would say, the meta of jiu-jitsu in competition, or in general?
Like let's say this, like jiu-jitsu as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I love the diversity of clients. Like, I get every type of person from every type of background, which I love. It's just the ones that always make me laugh are like people that are surgeons that work on small body parts, and they're out there risking their hands and their wrists and like their everything. And I'm like, that's so, you're in school for 15 years and you're going to risk it to strangle some guy on the mats in pajamas. I just think that's hilarious. But I love how mainstream it's becoming. Like now, I think every jiu-jitsu person ever, when we walk around, we just wear old competition t-shirts. I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
about you
I
guys.
still have a couple.
Exactly. I mean, I have like 100, right? So, you go to a bar or a restaurant, you go to the bathroom, and like someone recognizes your shirt and they're like, "Oh, I trained there," right? And that happens now more than ever. No matter where I go, I bump into jiu-jitsu people. So, I mean, I imagine it'll continue to grow. I guess like karate was like that maybe 10, 20 years ago, where it exploded and everyone was doing it. And I feel like kind of jiu-jitsu's, it seems to me, is starting to follow that route a bit.
Okay, so let's go back to the Keenan thing then. So now Keenan has his kind of mythology of how he thinks jiu-jitsu is going to turn and all that kind of jazz. And then also, if you listen to John Danaher, he also kind of has a vision of like where it's going as a sport and all that kind of jazz, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard both arguments, but it's like, where do you kind of like see it? Like, I get what Keenan's saying, where it's like, okay, we're obviously with the introduction of like heel hooks, you're going to get more people coming into the competition field through IBJJF and all that kind of jazz, right? But I see Danaher's argument where it's like, yeah, it's becoming more of that pro show, that mainstream guys are going to make more money doing it, right?
For sure. And that's the thing, right? Like, as time passes more and more, I feel more and more confident that I could, if ever anything happens to my day job, I can just kind of work full time in jiu-jitsu. And I think that's pretty incredible, but that speaks to the sport's evolution, right? And in terms of Keenan, I think for Nogi, he was saying that the game is imploding into kind of wrestling and leg locks, right? And gi BJJ is kind of going the other way with more intricate lapel feeds and inversions and back takes and bolos and that kind of stuff that I guess quote unquote modern jiu-jitsu. And I mean, that's kind of where it seems to be going now. And I think it's like I wanted to, I think, compete at an IBJJF. Like I wasn't that into the idea, but I looked at it and I was like, I have to pay for my like black belt certificate. I have to pay for my IBJJF membership. I have to pay for the like registration, and just all that stuff would have been like $600, And then I'm like, why would I pay that much money just to go compete? If I even just wanted to do worlds, like I get it, you don't want 1,000 black belts in adult worlds, but it's going to cost me $5,000 just to qualify. Potentially, right? Like flight, hotel, car, IBJJF registration 3-4 times to qualify. So I can totally see why there's such a strong draw. And for me, I don't really like MMA. Like I always feel bad watching people get hit in the head because I worry about the long-term effects, right?
Yeah.
Like, whatever it is, like Alzheimer's or just brain damage or mood disorders, like from all the trauma to the head. So I always feel, I feel like I can't enjoy UFCs as much, but now there's like who's number one and fight to win and whatnot. And I love those. Like I now understand the excitement that MMA people had for UFC. I only watch UFC if it's like a grappler fighting, like if it's Damian Maia or Jacare or BJ Penn. Otherwise, I look away when they're standing up and I just watch when they're on the ground.
That's kind of why I didn't really pursue MMA as much as Aaron did, and his 1-0 amateur record that I always like to bring up.
Wait, one win, right?
One win.
Awesome. That's 100%. That's amazing.
Walk away. Top. Every time MMA comes up, I'll be like, "Oh, Aaron's got one more fight than I will ever have."
I'd like to do one. But I had like retinal issues, so I can't take the strikes to the head because I can lose my vision. But man, I so badly wanted to do 1 or 2 fights just for fun and for I guess the TV and
it's like positives. Get to fulfill a dream, test out your jiu-jitsu, test out your competitive spirit. Cons might go blind.
Yeah. But I mean, Darson did it too, right? Like I love watching these BJJ guys jump in, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he did. I think he did like a one amateur fight, I think, as well. And then
I think he did 1 amateur and 1 pro, I think. But yeah, I think he won both of them, and that was it. He's done.
There, he just went down the rabbit hole of jiu-jitsu, just like all of us.
Did you watch? Yeah. I feel like he really loves jiu-jitsu, and he's got such a good and creative mind for it. It's like it's kind of a shame to watch him go to MMA. But did you watch Rodolfo fight? Rodolfo Vieira in MMA?
Did he fight recently or?
I think he maybe a couple months ago. But man, that guy,
okay,
it's
well,
terrifying.
that guy's a monster. He's a monster.
He was a monster. He was a monster in jiu-jitsu. He's going to be an even bigger monster in MMA.
Well, I mean, definitely you can see his difference between Gi and no Gi, right? At him at like ADCC
100%.
versus him at Gi, but yeah, that was like it was a terrifying difference between him and his opponent.
Oh yeah, and I think he's fighting. He's doing a fight to win, or is he doing He's.
Oh yes, December 11th. He's fighting.
Yes.
Is
Kaynan.
it Kaynan? Yeah, Kaynan.
Kaynan.
Yeah. Oh man, that's
Yeah.
gonna be like I love that stuff. I have that marked in my calendar. That's who's number one, I think. Like I'm such a jiu-jitsu nerd. I live for that stuff.
I don't know.
So
I think it's. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
No, because I was gonna say, just because we're on that. So like when you see a guy like that was tearing it up forever in jiu-jitsu competition, then floats back into like and goes into the MMA world, and now he's kind of coming back into strictly the grappling world. How do you feel about that? Like,
I love it.
Him, you just going to it.
I love it. I love it because, like we were saying, there's more and more money in jiu-jitsu. If you remember, Rodolfo actually came back. There was like a weed company, some kind of cannabis company, and they held this like super fight tournament for $50,000. And that's when he first came back, and he beat one of those. He had some really good fights. I think he fought Muhammad Ali too, maybe him or Herbert Santos, and then he also fought one of those brothers, the Muniz brothers.
Oh, one of them, yeah,
like the huge one. Yeah, so man, I was so happy because I guess they have to go to MMA to make money, right? But now that jiu-jitsu is offering more and more, like I'm really happy to see that.
It's good to see because like 10 years ago, I don't think
nothing
we wouldn't be anywhere near where we're at right now. And just imagine like another 10 years from now, I think things are going to get a lot more mainstream. There's going to be a lot more sponsors jumping on board, different revenue streams, like super fight shows. If people do like a good job promoting themselves, like, whether you like
huge market for it, right? Like
whether you like him or not, like Gordon Ryan, I think is a perfect example of that. Like he's basically like the quintessential pro wrestling heel bad guy, basically, where it's like, beat me if you can, but guess what? You're all going to pay to, whether you like me or you don't, you're going to pay to see me.
I mean, I totally get it, what people say about his like personality or whatever, but I feel like he's done so much for grappling, right? And also I feel like he's kind of changed the standard in terms of what people are willing to pay for knowledge in terms of the DVD cost, right? And what people should sell their knowledge for. So I look at all these amazing black belts like Doderline and whoever else, and they're selling their DVDs for $30, but now, I'm happy to see them selling it for more. And that client on the client side, people are saying, yeah, I can pay $200-300 for this because someone put 20 years into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes,
I think, and that means they're going to support themselves, and the more people can, I think, live off jiu-jitsu, the more the knowledge base will expand and refine, right? So I love it. Yeah,
I think that's a great thing as well, because I think even using like personal training as an example, like if you're growing your knowledge base, more, you can help more people with whatever the case may be. Like there's nothing wrong with charging or making more for that. And it's the same thing with jiu-jitsu as well. Like if you have the knowledge base and you're putting together it's just like, it's a product, just like anything else. If you're putting together a really good product, people are going to pay for it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like even with me, I used to charge such a low like rate, I guess you could say. Like I used to charge, I think, $32 an hour, which I think is an amazing rate, right, for an hour private lesson. And then I think I just started like realizing, especially as I became more like an adult or I got older, I was like, if you really want this, you'll find a way to allocate that money in towards the jiu-jitsu. If it's $25, let's say, because it's $50 an hour and you have a partner, most people can afford $100 a month for 4 semi-private lessons, And then like the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, well, people go to the bar and they spend $35 in a night or $50 in a night. So I was like, well, then maybe they just don't want it enough, right? And so why should I devalue my service?
Nope, you nailed 100%. it. 100%.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's been interesting. Like,
there's always those people that are like, oh man, I can't afford jiu-jitsu, but then they'll like go to the club and like start popping bottles with their friends. And it's, you prioritize, I think what it comes down to is you prioritize what's important. If doing like a jiu-jitsu private lesson with you is important, they're going to find a way to do that. Or if they want to focus on their health and, maybe they want to hire like a trainer privately and they want to allocate their money towards that, they're going to find a way to do that. If they want to pop bottles in the club and pop Molly, they're going to find the funds to do that.
Molly's dead.
I think we're all too old to be using that word Molly. But I'm one of the like points where I think I was just like, okay, this is like enough is enough. There was a guy who like haggled me down so much and, really gave me like a sob story. And for me, I was like, it's not all about the money. So I dropped my rate to a ridiculously low rate. Next 2 classes, guy comes in a brand new showy roll. And I was like, oh man, I got hustled. So
it shows
that's
up
why you always sell small packages to those guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't like to do packages. Like I prefer to do one-on-one. I hate to like pressure someone into buying 50 or whatever, but I'm not going to go back and say, hey, you came in 2 new showy rolls. Now your price is back to normal, right? But it was just after that, I was like, okay, that's when it really hit me. I was like, priorities, I guess.
Priorities. Showy roll gi private with Arthur.
Yeah.
Showy roll. I don't think I've ever asked you this, actually.
Gis make you get better, don't they?
That is true. That is true.
If I have a gi and I look like a professional,
then you must be.
Then I must learn through osmosis or something. This is a strong possibility. Hey, Arthur, I want to ask you this. I don't think I ever have. Like, how did you actually get involved in jiu-jitsu, and like, where did you start? And how did you discover jiu-jitsu? How did you get into it?
I'm not involved at all. It's my brother. I have an older brother, and like I don't know about you guys, but older brothers are kind of like dads, I guess you could say, but maybe more connected to the current scene, I guess. My brother was heavily into kung fu and judo. He actually took 3 months off work, I think this year, and trained in the mountains of China. he is hard, and he's like, he's a VP at a big bank, like an investment bank and everything, and he just took 3 months off. And so he's, it's pretty cool. I mean, he's almost 40 now and he's really into it, but he signed me up. So I did wushu, I did taekwondo, and this is exactly my point. Back in 2006, nobody knew what BJJ was. So I liked wrestling on the floor. Like I just thought that was way more fun than anything. I didn't know that was a sport. Like I wouldn't even think to Google that because I'm like, that's just not a thing, right? Like, karate, taekwondo, but you don't know BJJ. And then I remember at the taekwondo gym, which actually hilariously is like up the street from Ascension where I started jiu-jitsu. I used to grapple with the like assistant instructor all the time. And I was like, this is the best part of taekwondo class is like when we, like floor fight. And then, so then I went to Ascension because my brother signed me up, and he signed me up for, I think, like wrestling, judo, Muay Thai, and BJJ. And I gravitated heavily towards the ground stuff just because I'm not really into hitting people. And the judo class, I was kind of the only kid. So I remember I had like this big Russian partner in the very first class as we drilled throws. He tossed me and popped my rib. So obviously I didn't go back just because I was too small, I think, right? And obviously my break fall wasn't good enough. And the BJJ, especially once I got to the adults class, like I kind of quit when I was in the kids class. I did quit. And then when I came back and I went to the adults class, like I learned more in my first day than a year in the kids class. And it's because all the adults teach you, right? Then it goes instead of that like one person at the top and all the equivalent students in the adults class, it's kind of like a pyramid, right? And you have these interactions at every level. So knowledge really does flow down. And that was like my first class. I was like, man, I'm in. This is amazing.
Mm-hmm. And that was when at Ascension before, correct?
Yeah. So that was like, I was there for almost like 10 years or something. I was there for a long time. And yeah, so it was good. Like those, and I have to say that there was like a couple years where it was amazing. Like the group we had, everyone was really nice. Nobody rolled hard. Like nobody tried to kill you. And I think when those kind of people came in, people would like some of the senior belts, the mat enforcers would clear them out. So it was really good training. We trained a lot. Like we would train 3 hours a day, but it was so light that nobody would ever be, beat up or sore. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I think Omar's just created such a great culture back then too. And I think even now, I haven't seen
That's
him
it.
forever, but
Yeah.
yeah, like he's just been able to create that massive culture, and that all you guys were really good at jiu-jitsu, but well laid back, very
Yeah.
fluid.
And that's the thing, like that is probably my biggest takeaway from Ascension is like focusing on the culture. So you know how I'm telling you, I have these 3 students I focus on. They're people that will contribute to the positive culture. And like, I'm a contractor, right? I go and I teach at different places and I try to facilitate the building of a BJJ program. And that's my number one focus is like building a culture. Like I don't want champions. I don't even want really good people. I want people that are going to welcome new
don't
people.
want really
And
good people.
yeah, like I don't want someone whose goal is only to be the best, right? That does not sit like I guess congruently with what I want for the atmosphere. And so that's really been my goal, and I think we're really starting to get there. Like at a couple of the gyms, we have really good vibe, really good group of people, and the retention. Like I think at Bazooka is an excellent example. When I started there, we had like 4 students because it was infant program, right? And before lockdown, we had so many students that we couldn't even roll. We had to because there was just no room. Like that's how packed every class was. And the other really good indicator for me is the belt. So you have your typical pyramid in jiu-jitsu where there's the most white belts at the bottom. At Bazooka, we only have like 3 white belts. Like we don't have any
That's
white
good.
belts. Everyone's just a colored belt because it's all the students from day one. Like every time I have a Facebook memory, all the same people are still there. So it's been like, again, creating that good culture. And I think like when I think back to Ascension and what made it so good, it's like the people were really like tightly knit. So I try to really focus on building a community. It's been really, really interesting as I get to kind of fiddle with these. Every gym I can alter one variable and I see what works
Mhm.
and what doesn't. So
I think you mentioned
So
something that's very important is culture. It's so I don't think you said like you're not in the business, I think, of making world champion jiu-jitsu people that are like going to worlds. It's more of, you just want to have like a positive influence on people, and you want your classes to be fun. You just want people to learn jiu-jitsu. That's basically what it's about for you.
that's yeah, man. If you lose a couple pounds along the way, great. If you don't have a terrible armbar, even better. But really, like, I don't want you to just train for 5 years really hard or 6 months, 3 times a day, and then I never see you again. I want to see you all the way to black, right? Like,
no, I think that's awesome because again, it's all about the culture, and that's how you build a successful spot. And it's keeping those, again, it's retention,
yeah.
100%. That's
And
good. And then
yeah.
then you build off that.
Yeah. I feel like just as the instructor, you can't carry that on your shoulders. The retention thing, like you can be charismatic, you can be incredible, you can remember everyone's birthday and their dog's eyes, like the color of the dog's eyes, but you'll need your senior students. Like, of course, I won't say who, but in the States, there was a gym that some of my friends trained at, and they said the culture was so bad because of the person at the top, and it would flow down to kind of the generals, and then it would flow down. And it was just such a bad environment that everyone would leave. And I was like, yeah, like it does start at the top, right? So I tried to like to kind of, I guess, lead by example, and I tried to. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and that's kind of like something that Mike and I had. Like, we were slowly getting into that spot just as we were kind of getting our program off the books, and it was really getting really better. And then obviously lockdown happened, and then we're kind of out of the game right now. But it's okay.
How is that
stronger
for you guys? Like, where are you I guess gonna get a new location and start up, like kind of dive more deeply into it, or do you still, I guess, want to build it back up before you grab your own spot?
Who knows what's going to happen? But we've actually had a big sponsor this year helping us out with that, and that's CERB. Justin Trudeau and the federal government have been huge. And no, I'm just kidding. But I don't know what I don't know. We'll have to see like what 2021 brings. You have to see what happens with restrictions and everything. Like, it's very difficult, I think, right now in this environment to attempt to do like, oh, I'm going to open a gym or I'm going to open
For
up a
sure.
fitness center, because you don't know, like, hey, great, I opened up this place, and then next week the government can come in and just go, hey, you know what, this might not be a good idea right now. We're going to shut you down.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I mean, I feel bad because some of our friends, you know, from Gringos, our teammates, they started in a program, and like, I feel like, I don't know the exact date, but I feel like they started in like February. And yeah, obviously that's the worst timing because I think the lockdown hit March 14th, right?
Yeah.
So just been a pretty brutal business for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think like anything like this, I think the biggest thing is you're gonna look at like an 18-month swing at least, as far as kind of like some sense of normalcy coming back. I mean, we have the vaccine possibility, this, that, and whatever, but I think especially with like businesses finding some sort of normality, yeah, like I wouldn't want to start anything until like, if I had to put anything down, like let's call it like a March, it would be a year before I would even like consider a new spot or anything like that right now.
and even beyond that, then you have to like, I just think of my friend who ran a very successful salsa business down in Australia, but in a core area. And after the 08 financial crisis, his business shut down. He wasn't affected, but all of his clients didn't have the extra funds to put into it, right? So then like you have to kind of think about that too. Like, sure, COVID could be over, but a lot of people suffered in terms of income, right? So who's going to spend
right?
$120 a month on or whatever
to roll with somebody and
when they could do it in their basement, right? Information is accessible. Like, you could just buy mats for $500 and pay a coach. You know, everybody pays them $10. Like, it's
you could go
better
bolo,
bang for your buck. You know, yeah,
go bolo in your basement, tug on some gi pants. You know. What are your thoughts kind of like going forward with, because you have an interesting perspective, like you have the kind of the public health perspective, you have like health background, but then you also see like the business side of jiu-jitsu, and like you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and you know, you can see the impact that it has as well. And, you know, of course, if you're going on social media, you probably see, you know, a lot of people are, you know, very upset and emotional with like, you know, there's like a big range of like, you know, COVID is this, COVID is that, like, you know, jiu-jitsu gyms are essential, but then you have an interesting perspective in all this. Like, that's one thing I actually want to get your thoughts on is, you know, how do you handle this going forward? Like,
I mean, like I can't speak for public health, of course. I can just give you my opinion.
Of course.
Maybe the lockdowns, I don't know, like, it's hard to say, right? Like, is it the best strategy? Is it not? Because really, I think over time, you'll know. Of course, I mean, I'm not scared about my own health with COVID, but, you know, they say like you're infectious 48 hours before symptom onset. So I could be fine, but then I could go see someone and then they can go see their grandma. And like, for me, that's kind of what's been stopping me. Surprisingly, during COVID, the private requests, like the privates have just been through the roof. Like, I probably never in my life had more requests for privates than COVID, but of course I haven't been taking them, right? So I'm kind of torn. I'm definitely more on the cautious side, but I'm also very lucky because I have a day job, right? So I really feel bad for people who are just doing jujitsu or, you know, gym owners, because you don't, you know, that is your day job, right? So you're getting slammed, and I think it's very easy to say we should be locking down when you're not, you know, running negative every month. But for instance, my dad's business has been getting crushed for almost a year now, right? So and his rent is through the roof, like.
Yeah, and it's not like the government's coming to pay that bill for them, right? It's like you're kind of stuck in the cold. You don't know, that rock between the hard places. Like, yeah, this might be really good for the overall sense of it, but it's also like you're crushing me in this sense, and you're not helping me out. Like, how are people supposed to eat and do X, Y, Z?
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad because small businesses are such a big part of Canada's economy, right? But hey, me just as a person, I err on the side of caution. And I mean, I think that's even reflected in my jiu-jitsu. So I'm always just cautious, and I prefer to take a cautious approach to anything. But I can definitely see that people are getting sick of lockdown and they're having a tough time. And I also have like friends or people in my, you know, my social connections that live alone, and so now they're not seeing anybody and they're not making any money, and maybe they don't qualify for serve because of whatever conditions they didn't meet. So yeah, I mean, I just overall I think it's been brutal for a lot of people.
So you're not advocating going to open up a barbecue stand and then have everybody show up there, maskless and all that kind of jazz, right?
You know what? Like I mean, nothing to do with the barbecue, but I've actually, I typically don't like eating out at restaurants. Like I just like home cooked food. But we've been trying to support, local businesses. So we've eaten out more, my wife and I, since March than ever, which she's thrilled about because she loves to eat out. But
yeah,
Are any of those places a Texas barbecue place called Addison? It's barbecue by any chance.
Hey, like maybe he came out way ahead in all of this. If his GoFundMe covers more than all of his legal fees, he got all that advertising, and I guess all of the people that are on one extreme end of the political spectrum are drawn there to go buy the food. Maybe he came out ahead more than anyone in all of this.
Yeah, freedom, guns, barbecue, America. I mean, Canada. I mean, I don't know.
But it would just like when I look at Florida and when they're like fully open, I'm like, I'm sure many people would prefer that, but me personally, I'm kind of like happy that that's not the way it is.
Yeah, Florida just doesn't give a fuck. Like,
no, they really don't.
Whenever I see like someone arrested for something ridiculous, it's always out of Florida. Or whenever I watch America's Most Wanted, it's like Florida.
Oh yeah, Florida or
Florida
like,
Mans.
Yeah,
Florida Mans is like the new Brampton Mans.
Yeah.
So there is actually a common question that I linked to this. We're doing a kill, fuck, marry. Brampton, Scarborough, Hamilton. You have to kill one, F1, marry one. Go.
Okay, I'd marry Scarborough. Hamilton.
That's your hood. So
yeah. I'd probably kill Brampton.
Yeah.
That's just that. Yeah, Brampton. Yeah.
Kill Brampton, F Hamilton.
Yeah.
I think everybody has chosen to kill Brampton throughout this entire survey.
That's good. There's some consistency.
There's consistency, that's for sure.
I think it's like 15 kills in like Brampton's direction as of right now.
I don't know what it is. Yeah. You guys are both in Brampton, right?
Fuck no!
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I think you just triggered Aaron.
Are you in Gallatin?
No.
You guys are in Peel region?
Yeah, we're Peel region, but
Aaron's technically Peel region.
I'm like on the border of Halton and Mississauga, so I like to call myself a Haltoner.
I'm in Vaughan, but I'm literally across the street from Toronto. So like I could throw a rock and then I'm in Toronto.
Is that like 16th Avenue? Or
No, I'm in like the Vaughan area. It's like Steeles and like Highway 27, like that area.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I'm like just on the north side, but like if I threw a rock, I'm basically in Toronto. Like once you cross Steeles, you're in Toronto. Shout out Rexdale. And then I'm like 5 minutes from like the Brampton border, like Highway 50. So like I'm pretty much wedged between like one lockdown and another one, and then like York's like kind of sort of almost on the border, but there's some I think pushback to like higher level of governments, which my wife works for the government. And I was actually having this discussion with her, like when people are like, "Oh man, it's the government, man," they have like that whole
there's provincial powers, man, pressing up, and even higher than them pressing down, right? Like every
There's different there's different levels of government, and not all of them agree on every situation on how to handle things. So like municipally, for example, my wife works for a municipal. They don't want to. We want to stay open. Like this doesn't make sense. Like
is York region?
It's York region. Yeah,
that's what I had heard. That I guess the leader of York region municipality was saying the lockdown doesn't make sense because malls is like not a source of case. Which I'm always down to do what's backed by data, right? So if cases aren't coming from the gym and they're not coming from the malls, then why not, right?
And it's like, why are you closing them? But I think it's also that I think they're probably looking at, okay, like where are people congregating
and hanging out?
Do we need to have like millions of people going into a mall? Do we need to have hundreds of people doing jiu-jitsu breathing on top of each other and close, intimate contact as you know, like, well, I haven't been training much recently, but like, you know, like pretty much if you're basically taking some of these back, you're pretty much spooning them. So you might as well.
Get it? Yeah. Yeah.
There's close contact, you know, things can happen. Like even with precautions are taking, like you never know. Cause like I think we were talking even before, like in Hamilton, there was Spinco. There was like a bike studio. I'm not sure.
Oh, and like 16 people got it or something?
Oh no, it was like
More.
70.
So
it was
like 70.
It was like 70
Cases or
Yeah.
contacts?
Yeah.
Linked directly to that one studio, and I think one of the investors is a doctor. So I actually read into it because I wanted to know, like, okay, like with fitness, like what's going on? Like, how did it happen? Did they do anything negligent? No, they did everything that they need to do. Like, it's like, okay.
Well, I noticed that they changed the safe, I guess, droplet projection distance to 3 meters for exercise from 2 meters, right?
That's probably, I think that's actually linked to Spinco now because they're fine because they spaced out all the bikes because it was a spin studio. You go in, hop on a bike for an hour. You do a class, but then they spaced out all the bikes. You're wearing a mask.
Yeah. I mean, you're literally locked into one spot, right? So
you're in one spot. That's it.
Yeah.
And then you do your thing, put a mask on, you walk out. There's like no showers, no nothing. And they found out that they did like screening, everything at the front, everything you should have did, temperature checks, all that. And then just, you know, something slipped through. Unless somebody went in, they're like, I don't feel well, but what the hell? I'm gonna hop on.
Which you're always gonna get, right? Like,
yeah, I think there's like some sort of margin of error with that. I think the biggest thing is like people just have to recognize and go, you know what? I'm not feeling good. Let me just lay low and then see what happens.
But unfortunately, that you can just never do that, right? Like, you know, people do weird stuff all the time. Like when you drive, it's the perfect example, right? Like you have someone that, you know, makes a U into the wrong direction road, or you have people, you know, in Brampton, I think someone was driving on the wrong side of the highway. Like you're just always going to have those people, right? Like
Brampton. Aaron, you got to get out of Brampton, man.
I'm nowhere near Brampton. I don't understand how you make that mistake though. Like that's pretty
amazing.
That's like legit. Like, and we're talking about a divided highway. Like if it's divided highway, if you go in the wrong way, that's crazy.
How did you even get in? Like where did you enter from?
That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah.
Like, how did you even do it?
Yeah.
Right. Like I know there's always like exits and on ramps that are like kind of like the ones you can't go down because they're a one way or whatever. Yeah. So unless that person went down like one of those, that's the only way I could think you could do it. But like that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, and then just to keep driving down it, you know, after seeing
just keep going
35 cars, like maybe I'm going the wrong way.
It reminds me of what's that movie with John Candy, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where they're on the highway and they're going the wrong way, and all the guys are like, "You're going the wrong way." It's like, who's this asshole over here? He keeps telling you guys are going. It's like that car's going the wrong way. Where are all these guys going? They're all going the wrong way.
Okay, I actually did that once, not on a highway, but at Rev, the parking lot. It's like a one-way exit, and you know, to exit you got to go like all the way around the building. So I kind of always just like sneak out the same side, and one time it was one of the students' parents, and like we, you know, he kind of drove in the middle, so we were stuck, and I was like, can I just get through? And he's like, yeah, and then I was like, well, like, do you mind moving? And he's like, oh. Anyways, I ended up saying, oh, I think you're going the wrong way. And he's like, no, you're going the wrong way. And I like looked down and there's like a massive arrow. And I've literally been teaching there for 7 years. And I was like, oh yeah, it's that way. That's why I always drive this way. And I just like completely blanked out, and it was the most embarrassing thing.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a 6-foot yellow arrow just below us.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Don't know how to drive, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Scarborough people.
Yeah.
Was this in Scarborough or is it somewhere else?
It was in Brampton.
It was in Brampton.
No.
It was in Brampton. So what happens when you go to Brampton? I always notice driving gets exponentially worse the second I cross that border. And also I've grown up in Brampton, so like I've gotten used to the terrible driving over the years, but then it's sometimes like because I live on the border and like I have like family that are still in Brampton. So as soon as I drive in, as soon as I'm in Brampton, I'm like, wow, the driving has just gotten like
it's different.
It's gotten so much worse.
It is different. I can honestly, I'm telling you, like whenever I do go to Brampton, it just feels different.
You just start shuddering, like, oh. It's like, why are you saying? So why'd you just shudder all of a sudden? I don't know.
So Arthur, because I want to go back to kind of like how you were saying, it's like, you're a contractor now. You go to different clubs, you try to build cultures and all that kind of jazz. So why was that something that kind of like drew to you? You were like, okay, this is a thing I want to do, or you just didn't want to stick to like one spot, or like did it start from one spot and you kind of start building off that, or?
Well, I mean, I was teaching classes since I was a blue belt in 16, right? Like I used to, it started with, I think, a Sunday class. I used to go to a Sunday class, and there was a guy that volunteered, and I guess eventually, like, I think because of his family, he couldn't teach it. So I was asked to take it over, and it kind of just snowballed from there. But I definitely like teaching at many spots. Number one, there's just a greater pool of students. Like at the time, I was thinking from a perspective of potential for privates, right? If I'm only teaching at one spot, and especially if there's more than one instructor, there's less people in the pool, more instructors. It just doesn't make sense, like, I guess from a career business perspective. So then the other thing is I like teaching at different places, because if I ever don't, if I ever stop enjoying teaching at one place, or if it's just no longer a good fit, then I can walk away, versus putting all of my eggs in one basket. If I put all my eggs in one basket and I turn down any opportunities and I get fired for whatever reason, then that's it, right? So I kind of like, that I can float around, and yeah.
Kind of like the freedom of everything. Like,
yeah,
I
love
pick
the
and
freedom.
choose like where you want to teach and like who you want to take on for privates.
That's exactly it. Like I like that, there's no politics, there's not too much overhead control, like depending on the gym, particularly like one of the gyms, for example, there's like zero overhead control, which I like. I like kind of the freedom to, run it the way that I like to.
Have you ever given, sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
No, you go, Mike.
Have you ever given any thought to like, hey, I'm teaching at all these spots. Like, do you want to open up your own gym one day? Like, what's in the future for you right now? Like,
honestly, my career is, I think, really starting to get to where I want it to in terms of my long-term career goals. I'm pretty happy with how things are going. I feel like I'm finally on, like, I feel like I had this feeling in jiu-jitsu several years ago where things were starting to align, and, the work I was putting in was starting to show. And now I feel like it's happening with my career. And I'm kind of more interested in my personal, like my actual professional career. Jiu-jitsu is kind of a fun thing. I don't know that I would ever open my own gym. Number one, it's a lot of responsibility. My dad, like I said, has owned so many businesses over the years, and my mom's family too. And it's just a lot of stress, a lot of headache. I love that. For example, I think of Rev, like the head instructor, Joel. He can't just go on a vacation for 4 months. Like his students, his academy, his business. He just can't do that. Like, I'm imagining he can't do that, right? I feel like he's always limited to certain slots. Like, he's a big player at the gym. For me, I can go on vacation for 6 weeks and nobody cares, and I love that. I love that.
Whatever.
Yeah,
we got this guy
honestly, like I have no equity in the company. Like, of course, I care that it does well, but I just like if ever I think teaching, you start to become not as good a coach when you go and it feels like a job. Right.
Yeah, I feel you. You want to be able to, again, like we use the analogy in mechanics of like shut the toolbox. You can't fix a car when it's shut. So it's over. It's done with it for now. So when you want to be able to just shut it, go home, do what you want to do, focus on this XYZ, and then do whatever else.
Yeah, and it's good. Yeah, and especially as it's some of the dojos kind of where I guess I'm the head BJJ instructor. It's like some of my students are becoming more senior. Like Belinda's almost a brown belt now, and some of my other students that I've been teaching for like 10 years, they're at that level of like brown belt basically, and I'm comfortable knowing that they can teach if I need a break or if something happens, and I kind of like that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good. How does it make you feel, especially like, going through the ranks of like, again, white to black, and then now you've been teaching people from white all the way up to brown belt. Like, how does that feel for you?
Awesome.
Because it's obviously like a recent thing too. It's
not
like you've been teaching for 20 years, and this is like a brand new thing.
Yeah. So particularly working as a contractor under a head instructor, it's a little bit different because except for maybe 3 or 4 students who train maybe exclusively with me, most of the students are kind of split. So
Okay.
I don't make that, I don't have as much, I guess, authority and control, which is fine. Like, I understand where the responsibility is spread across, but having students and knowing that I've only ever taught this student and this jujitsu is completely my jujitsu, man, it is amazing. It's so rewarding. I personally, I get such a kick out of it. And when when I see, I have some students that are really shining stars and watching them just go to an open mat and wreck people that are higher belts and bigger, I was like, yeah, jiu-jitsu works. Like, it's super rewarding and I really love it. And having the same students for 5 years, like my one, I guess the con of working at so many places is I'm limited in how many times I can teach. So some of these, pretty much every gym, like the maximum you can train with me is 3 to 4 times a week, but not everyone can make all 3 or 4, versus if I offered 7 classes and they could only make 5, but there's a huge outcome difference when you compound all those extra classes. But man, it is freaking awesome. Like I have a couple students that I'm super excited to promote, and I keep pretty close track. So I have a attendance tracker. At the end of every semester, I tally all the total attendance points, and it's cumulative. And every promotion, whether it's a stripe or a belt, is tracked with a date into this tracker. So I have kind of like, I was thinking I wanted to do like, I think it's a pivot table for my little tracker just to see the outcome and the changes. But yeah, I love it. Like I have to say, it is truly as enjoyable as like competing and winning.
Yeah, because I think you've made a pretty seamless transition. Like, I think you really like teaching a lot more. And I think I kind of made that transition, I think, the last couple of years as well, where I've gotten to the point where like I competed a lot, but I'm really starting to enjoy, I think, teaching actually a lot more than actually competing. Doesn't mean I'm like never going to compete again. It's just, I really felt like the last couple of years, like I've taught before, like when I was like a blue belt and a purple belt, and I was just like, filling in for people, and it wasn't a big deal. And I like, hey, I'd do it. I didn't like hate it or anything. It was just like, hey, I'll help out, sure. But like I've actually developed, like I've actually genuinely enjoyed teaching the last couple of years at the program that we're doing. We were almost getting to the point where we're going to start giving out some belts, and then things got shut down.
I feel like that's a big step, getting those first senior students. It's like a very special, to give out your first. But so you guys, like that's what I'm talking about. Like when you go and you guys have your own program, like that's got to be amazing.
We're this close. We're getting there. Where I'm like,
hey, it'll come back.
We're starting to see. I think there's some new belts coming. And then
they're like, hey, they're not shit anymore.
Did you get submitted by any of your students yet?
Aaron's several times by everybody. Myself, I'm invincible, so I don't get submitted by anybody by anything ever. No, I don't. No, you know what? Like if I'm
too junior still.
What's that?
It's still a little bit too junior, I guess. Like considering you haven't done belts yet.
Some of them are, but I actually threw myself in some submissions where I'm like, oh, this guy's got a good triangle. I'm going to throw myself in it.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I was like, oh shit, I'm stuck. I can't get out of this thing. And then like, he's not doing enough to like submit me, but like, I can't get out. Like, I'm just stuck. I'm like, this sucks. And I was there for like 5 minutes. I eventually found a way to like wiggle out, but like, it was a struggle.
Well, I did get caught in an ankle lock once by Alex, and I was like, I really didn't want to tap.
Let it break, man. Let it break.
Just bleed. UFC.
Full day tomorrow.
Call time in the round.
He's really gonna break my fucking ankle.
And time. Good job. Yeah, you almost had me there. Good job.
So yeah, that was the one time, and I was really pissed after that one, and I was limping too.
Oh, you waited to tap, yeah.
Oh yeah, I waited. I was avoiding it, and I was like, if I don't do it, I'm gonna break that shit off. So I'm like, fuck it.
There's also a certain Kimura trap system I showed a student that ended up pulling it off on Aaron as well. I think he was a little annoyed, and usually what happens when you have like a lower. I've seen this happen. I think we've seen this experience happen a lot of times where like somebody who's not as experienced catches somebody with something that's more experienced. So like a white belt might catch like a blue belt, or a blue belt might catch a brown belt, for example. You could just see like, all right, how much time's left on the clock? It's like a minute, 2 minutes. I'm like, I saw this happen a few times where purple belt student came in who was a training partner. He got loop choked by one of our white belt students. And there was about a minute left on the clock. And I could just look on the guy's face and go, I'm like, duck, cover up for the minute. I'm like, just do this. I'm like, don't die for the last minute. But then, like, you can always see that happen. I've seen Aaron do that a few times where he's like, oh, that's it. I got to get this tap back and absolutely just murder somebody after it happens.
Not one, like 2 or 3 taps back. That's how you work it.
You have to assert dominance. But you know what though? Like if I generally like, hey, I'm teaching somebody and I'm like, I get caught slipping and they catch me in something, I'm like, you know what? Like if I taught them that, they should be doing that to me. Otherwise, like I'm a really shitty teacher. Like let's be honest. Like if my students aren't eventually, submitting me or giving you a hard time, like
then
you're not doing a good enough job of teaching them, in my opinion.
Well, I think like some of my students have hit that point where I guess my style of rolling is like I do put myself in every position. Like I really, when I'm rolling in the dojo. Anyways, like now they've started submitting me. So like 3 or 4 of the blue belts have submitted me 2 or 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, the first time I never want to tap, but after the first one, I'm like, okay, I build it up.
Fine,
yeah.
Whatever.
Well, one guy, like he just has killer ankle locks, and he just keeps catching me, and I'm like, oh my god.
Isn't that your move, man? And he's just doing it to you. It's
man, you have no idea how annoyed I was. I was like, oh. And the first time he submitted me, like I was gonna take his back, and then I just like eased up, and he caught the perfect ankle lock. Like it was, I tapped before he even applied it because I just, as soon as he wrapped it, I was like, that's perfect. And then he hit that like Kyotera De La Riva ankle lock on me, and I'm like, well, man, this guy's just like stacking them up now. And then there's another guy, and I think I think he's my top student. He's a killer, and he's 50, and he's a blue belt. He is terrifying. And this guy one day, just as a joke, I wrote a message to him, and I was like, bring your tapping pants today. And guess who got submitted for the first time? He submitted me. So then I was like, all right, that's it. Let's go. So I call him for another round, and I'm like, I'm going to submit you 3 times. So I go and I submit him 3 times, and then I was like, that's not enough. And then he submitted me again. So in like 5 years, this guy had not submitted me, and then twice in one day.
Who's wearing the tapping pants now?
I know. So now I'm like, now I don't say anything. Now like I just
I'm gonna start using that tag. I think we're gonna get that shirt on. I'm like, hey Aaron, the next time we roll,
get your tapping pants on.
Bring your tapping pants. Because I'm gonna grab that lapel and I'm gonna stall you to the death. To the death.
I'm never gonna say that ever again. I think that was a good learning lesson for me.
Stalling to the death, or getting submitted by your students?
Getting submitted after talking smack to them. That was a good piece of humble pie.
You're like, I'm just gonna shut up now.
Yep. Well, especially when I said like, all right, that's it. Now you're like really getting it, and then I got submitted again. I was like, wow, that's just like, let's just call it a day.
You know what? I think I'm good now.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, kind of like, obviously you're focused on your career now. Where do you kind of like see your students going and being more competitors down the road, or just kind of being what they do?
Yeah, like I'm very happy with the way things are going. Like like I said, like culture is my biggest focus more than anything, like retention and culture. And I think a really good sign is like when these guys, sometimes they catch you in a submission, they'll like pretend to let go. And I don't want them to do that to me, but I kind of like more of a traditional, I guess, environment where I said, like, if a senior belt comes in, you shouldn't be trying to rip their head off, like it's just not a really good look. Like you should kind of roll with them a couple times and, kind of match their intensity. But in terms of career, like, I guess I'm at a point where I can maybe move up and really take that deep dive in. But then I'm afraid that that's going to cut into my teaching, because once you take on that higher level of responsibility, there's, things happen, and guess who has to stay behind, right? So it's kind of hard to have like a rigid 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. class, knowing that work could go until 8 p.m. tonight, or whenever,
Yeah.
right? So I'm kind of like at that point right now where I'm trying to figure out. I kind of like how things are right now, but I think it's, this is an opportunity, and I'm like,
Mhm.
a rare opportunity, right? Do I let it pass me by?
No, exactly. You have to figure out what's best for you, obviously, down the road. But then again, later on in your life, when you get kids in the mix, if you want, then everything gets fucked up. So don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah. That's the other like decision we're trying to figure out right now, Yeah.
No. Then
You,
then you'll train once a week. It'll be fine.
Aaron, you have how many kids?
I got two. Mike's got one.
I got one. Still got the
What do you-
one.
what's your like feedback in terms of having kids and career and work-life balance and relationship? Like,
Well,
I'm very
There's
curious.
a balance. What?
there's a
How does
balance.
how does
What?
it impact? How does it
There's a
impact
balance?
everything?
I think
Well,
you.
yeah.
I think you learn your. Well, Aaron can speak for himself, but I think you learn your priorities. I think very quickly. So.
Yeah, sometimes you think you do. It all depends on your position, right? Because again, like you said, career wise, it's like it depends on what you're doing, right? So I don't know what your next step is, but obviously if it's like a management role and your responsibilities are X and all that kind of jazz, it's a balance, right? And it's a fine balance, because like I'll be the first one to admit, especially like I had just taken on a new management role where I was at the time, and then basically I had my first child, and then basically my my oldest, who's 5 now, the first year of his life I was barely home. It's just because I was at work, and I barely trained. I don't even think I trained. I would train like once a month. So I would pay
Wow.
my membership and pay my $150 a month, but I would basically train once a month. Like that's how bad it was, right? And so you have to kind of figure out those priorities, right? And everybody's different, right? It all depends on how your partner works with it and all that kind of jazz as well. But the one thing I will say is that you have to figure it out quicker than I did. That's for sure, because it wasn't worth it for me, right? I missed way too much in that first year. And you can't get that back, right? And I didn't really realize it till like it was home with Connor by myself for like sometime in the summer, and I'm like, holy shit, I missed so much, right? And then you don't think about it, and because that whole thing where people say like, oh, a year goes by so fast. I'm like, a year does not go by fast. It's a year. How can a year go by fast? And it really does. So that's the one thing. You have to figure out what works best for you, and you have to prioritize what's going to be the best thing. But again, kids are great, but they're time suckers. They really are.
He's like, kids are great, but they're little succubusses on your soul.
Mike, like I do want to hear your input on this, but we babysat 2 kids for the first time ever, just me and Belinda, and holy crap, we babysat them for 3 days. Like, I basically watched TV with them for 9 hours a day to keep them occupied and fed them candy and like cereal. But man, like, dude, literally just going to get the mail took 45 minutes to get these 2 guys. Like,
Bro.
one of them ties his shoelaces, and I think he just learned, and it would be like 10 minutes to tie both. I was like, just come bare feet. Just come. I couldn't take it. For me, I'm so used to like, especially with my like busy work schedule, like bang, bang, bang. Like that's kind of how I like to move, right? And this kid was just like, well, maybe.
Well, I'm gonna just put this foot in, and then, I forgot something. I gotta go pee.
Oh my god!
And then I'm gonna. I gotta get it. Yeah, I don't know. Just try putting him to bed. That's another one where you just go.
Well, okay, so I played that strategy terribly. I kept them up till 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and I was like, I won't have to worry about these suckers tomorrow morning. These guys pop into my room at like 7 a.m. and I was like, god damn. So then instead of learning like a normal adult, I doubled down on my strategy. So like Saturday night, I do the same thing. I stay up late. And I'm like, I go until I'm just about to pass out. And I'm like, okay, now we'll see. Same thing, man. Like, kids do not need sleep, is what I learned.
That's
they need less than me.
iPad, watch their shit by themselves, and then you still sleep. But before Mike goes and gives you his whole thing, I had those 2 kids when they shut everything down by myself, because my wife was working in the basement at the time. So she was busy making money for everybody. And I had the 2 boys because the schools were canceled, daycares was canceled, everything was canceled. So it's just me and the boys. Like, you want to talk about like push your limits. Oh yeah, that was me. Like, what are you going to do all day? And basically can't go anywhere, can't drive anywhere. You can only drive around the block so many times. You can only take and it's wintertime at the time. You can only go outside for like 30 minutes. You can't keep them out there that
Aaron,
long.
you make it sound like you were stuck in prison. You were just at home.
That's how, this is what happens every time. Like, I'm always very curious about like marriage advice and like having children. And every time with children, and that's, one of my big fears, that it strains a relationship, because I've seen that a lot. And every time everyone's like, they eat up all my time, they fatigue me, they like suck my soul, and then they always finish, but it's worth it. And I'm like, but nothing you said like is aligns with that statement. Is that just like you have to say it because now the kids are born, and you don't want them to see the podcast? Or I don't know.
No, honestly, actually, at the end of the day, it actually is worth it. Like, Evan's been doing like some good stuff in school and everything, and it's like sometimes it's just good like spending time with them. Like, we're just hanging out playing Roblox, and he's like, "Hey, look, I built this track," and then I'm like jumping around on it, and he's just playing like random games, and he's just like figuring out like strategy. Like, he's playing like Clash Royale, and he's like, "Oh, look, like this card's good with that one, so like I can drop this guy at the bridge," and then he takes it. I'm like, where are you learning all this stuff? It's like it's good seeing like their development like in those ways as well. That's something I've been enjoying personally. And then in jiu-jitsu, for example, I'm like, I'm going to pass your guard. And then he actually framed on my shoulder and like threw his legs back in. So I'm just messing around. Like, I grab his legs. I'm like, I'm going to pass. And he's just like danking his legs, like come flying back in. I'm like, well, I wonder where you learned this one. You've been watching any John Thomas clips there on YouTube there, kid?
Is he wearing the hoodie?
Is he wearing a hoodie? I'm like, are you watching random Arthur clips? He's like, I got it. He's like, can I wear a hoodie under my?
Because the other thing is like John Thomas. I guess it's part of like the ginger phenotype. He's very pale, so he always looks cold too, right? So you're almost like happy he's wearing the hoodie.
Are you very cold over there?
Well, I am in the basement.
Aaron's got a tan.
Wearing a sweater.
Yeah.
You call that a tan?
I don't like, not compared to me, but compared to like Mike maybe.
I think it's a lighting thing. That's
okay,
all.
well, it's good lighting. It's working in your favor.
One more thing. We want to wrap up this evening. Me and you, we were actually in Costa Rica as this whole thing was going down.
Oh man,
I almost forgot. I have to slip this in.
I forgot.
What we need to do between us is we need to go back to Costa Rica, because I have this idea to reverse the polls of COVID.
We have to go back to Costa Rica again.
We have to go back to Costa Rica, and then it will disappear.
It was so funny. Like, and number one, I wish we could have met up. That would have been freaking amazing. Number two, like, we're living like basically remotely, and then finally at the end of the trip we come into the town and everyone's looking all paranoid, and like people are talking about like no toilet paper back in Canada, and I'm just like, what the hell happened in 2 weeks? I was just like going and looking at slots, and now like it's like a apocalypse in Toronto. Yeah, that was really trippy. And even on the plane, like getting to the plane, just because there was no information coming in, right? Because we were living basically in the jungle. I'm already paranoid, and like, how people are, especially before COVID, people are standing right beside me coughing, and I'm like, well, that's it.
It's like, well, I got herpes now.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. I think me and you, we need to head back to Costa Rica. I think unfortunately, like, you were on one side of the country and I was on another.
Yeah.
When you went to one place, you were there, and then
we were circling around each other.
Pretty much that's what it felt like. I'm like, oh, are you here? You're like, yeah, we're going to be here Tuesday. I'm like, great, I'm going to be here Thursday. Oh, I'm leaving Thursday morning. Well, damn it.
Yeah, that would have been so cool.
That would have been cool. But there's a lot of actually really awesome places to train there. I want to go back there. And I think if we go back there, COVID might disappear.
I think so. I trained at 2 gyms there. And the first gym, like, I saw his lineage, and he was like a 4th degree black belt. So I'm like, okay, this guy's definitely got that old school style, I would assume. And then I saw his coach on the wall, who was like an MMA guy, and I was like, oh no, it's gonna be one of these. He shook my hand and he literally like pounced on me, and he was a huge dude. That was interesting. And then I went and I trained at the other gym. and they were like kind of the opposite. They were very modern, and there was like a purple belt who wrecked me. It was so good. Yeah, it was good. It was good training.
Well, now we've realized that Mike has been shouldering the burden of this being his fault the entire time. It's actually both your faults.
9 months later.
So-
Yeah.
9 months later. I carry this burden.
You
for
carry this
everybody.
burden. by
But I'll
yourself.
start a GoFundMe and like other people, and I'll just use it to go on vacation. But if COVID does disappear as I go away, something positive would have come from it. Plus, I might come back with a tan again. You never know.
Arthur, we like to. We want to let you wrap us up. Is there anybody you want to thank or shout out or sponsorships you want to talk, hoodie sponsorships or anything you want to get? Let them know.
I mean, just thank you, I guess, for having me on, and thanks to all the gyms that let me teach and all the students that keep coming to class, so I don't, get fired.
That always helps.
Yeah.
Or else we'll have to start a GoFundMe for you. I think it will end with that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll end with that.
We'll end with that
It's all
awkward
good.
silence. That was beautiful.
Perfect.
Arthur,
You should like trim that into the beginning as well. I think that would be a good.
I think we'll have to.
Yeah,
I think we'll have to edit
silence.
out the place that you mentioned earlier as well. Wait. Aaron, you'll get on that, right?
I'll get it. I'll take the GoFundMe, put that at the beginning of the clip, and it'll be like, Arthur needs a GoFundMe? What?
I'm confused. What's going on? He has like 7 jobs. What's up? But Arthur, thank you for coming on tonight. It was hopefully when all these things settle down a little bit more, we can get together and train like
Yes.
the good old days.
My passing has gotten better since it was 0 last time we rolled, and then you followed up with, "I see why you play guard." I've actually started passing. That actually cut me deep, and I was like, man, I should probably learn how to pass.
Thanks for watching our videos, guys. And remember, don't forget to like and subscribe. Keep training.